Unit 6, Arrays. Topic 6.2, Traversing Arrays. In this lesson, we will focus on how to access every element stored within the array. Iteration statements can be used to access all the elements in an array. This is called traversing the array. A standard for loop is an excellent tool you can use to accomplish this. Let's take a look at the parts of a standard for loop. You have the I, which represents the index or position of each element. Array.length represents the size of the array. Notice that the index has to be less than the size of the array. To actually access an individual element, you need to write the name of the array and the index in the square brackets. Consider this code segment. What do you think it should do? This first line of code creates a default array called list of type integer with a length or size of 5. Because this is a default array of type integer, each value was initialized to the default value of 0. Let's start traversing the array at index 0. I is less than 5, so this is true. Let's now enter the for loop. Math.random generated the value 3, which will be assigned to list position 0. Let's increment the index by 1. We will continue until all the positions are filled. When index is 5, it no longer meets the condition of I less than 5. We now exit the loop. A for loop can also be used to access some elements in an array. For this reason, be sure to pay attention to the loop control variable initialization, the condition, and the increment. Consider this code. What has changed? How does this affect the execution? Just as before, this first line of code creates a default array called list of type integer with a size or length of 5. Because this is a default array of type integer, each value again was initialized to the default value of 0. We start the loop at index 0. I is less than 5, so this is true. We enter the for loop. Math.random generates the value 2, which is assigned to list in position 0. The change is in the increment. We are incrementing the index by 2. We will continue within the loop until the condition is false. Now consider this code. What has changed, and how does it affect the execution? In this case, we initialize the for loop variable to 1 and not 0. How might you write this using a while loop? You can traverse the array and access each element using a while loop. Notice the parts of the for loop and the while loop. Here's the loop control variable, the condition, and the increment. Notice where the increment is in the while loop. It's located just before closing the while loop. Traversing an array with an indexed for loop or while loop requires elements to be accessed using their indices. Some common mistakes. Since the indices for an array start at 0 and end at the number of elements minus 1, off by 1 errors are easy to make when traversing an array. These result in an array index out of bounds exception being thrown. A common error that will result in an index out of bounds is to include the array.length as part of the index. Another common error is called an off by 1. In this example, we're skipping the last element. This is also an off by 1 error, as I'm starting by accessing the element at index 1 instead of index 0. Index 1 stores the second element in the array.